Recognize Umbral Walker D01. Recognize the Caleb G D02.
Hello, team! Thanks for listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files, episode 15. Welcome to the cave. I am everyone's favorite sidekick, Caleb, and Superman has a fortress of solitude? Please allow me to introduce Rich. We stand ready. Howard.
Totally true.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. We absolutely, and from the bottom of our hearts, appreciate you listening to us and giving us an hour or so of your time. If you would like to get a hold of us, please reach out. You can find us on Twitter at the YJ Files. Our show email is whelmedpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, our website is crashingthemode.com.
Don't tell me the mission was a success. The price was too high. No. We have to get out of here now.
No, we have to end this now.
Guys, we have got a very heavy episode to talk about today. Rich, let's start it off with...
Hello, Megan.
Okay, everyone. The title of this episode is Failsafe, and it changes everything. The release date was November 4th, 2011. The previous episode was October 21st, so I think it's 2 weeks later. We had a little bit of a skip there. The end episode date is October 16th. The director, not too surprisingly to me, fan favorite Jay Oliva. And the writer, Nicole Dubuc, again. Still don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I will like to say that we've gotten a hold of her, and we're hoping that we'll be able to get her on the show soon to talk about how she kills me every time I watch this episode. Thanks, Nicole. Ugh.
And other than our typical crew here for the voice actors, we do bring back Kevin Michael Richardson here, but this time not as Naboo. We see him as John Jones and some of the Green Lanterns, as well as some additional background voices. So,
oh yeah, he did Jon Stewart. Did he do Jon Stewart at the beginning? I think he did.
Yes, he did. Jon Stewart as well.
Yeah.
And I think he's actually done Jon Stewart in previous iterations. I don't know.
Great baritone voice.
He has such a fantastic voice. Yeah, I just love listening to him. Hearing him as the Joker in The Batman was a little bit weird, but I really liked it.
Nice.
But hey, we are just trying to delay the inevitable here. Oh, man. Folks, I'm just going to be dead honest with you. This is a pretty emotional episode. If you have not yet watched it, be prepared. We all know that Rich gets emotional when he watches Young Justice. I got emotional with this episode. This episode is the one that gets to me. And I have a cold, dead black heart without emotion whatsoever.
He's a weapon.
I don't know if I can handle it.
He's a weapon.
I don't know if I can handle it.
Yeah.
I am just a weapon. Oh, all right. Well, all right. Batman's calling us. Enough dawdling. We got to get to our mission briefing.
Just in time for your next mission.
All right. Our pre-credit scene is an alien starship entering orbit around the Earth. Both the Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan Green Lanterns are present. Jon Stewart, with the great booming voice we just mentioned, requests that the ship disengages all weapons and engines right before the ship kills them both. Or at least that's what it looks like. Batman announces a full offensive deploy, and I found it interesting that his full offensive deploy was releasing Superman, Captain Marvel, Martian Manhunter, and Captain Atom from his shuttle, which quickly results in all four of some of the League's heaviest hitters being killed, particularly after the Lanterns, and with the exception of maybe Wonder Woman. I don't know. Batman manages to eject from the shuttle as it's being destroyed, but is then just disintegrated by the ship. Like I said, or at least that's what it looks like. We cut back to the cave where Zatara and Red Tornado initiate terrestrial defenses, and Red Tornado tells the team that if the League fails, then they must defend the Earth.
We cut to Iris West Allen and Cat Grant, letting us know that the alien attack has spread across the entire planet, and also that we have lost the majority of the Justice League. Red Tornado is the last to fall and officially hands over the planet's defense to the team. Robin puts up a hologlobe of where the aliens are on the planet, and the team notes that a single scout ship is in the Arctic, likely heading towards Superman's Fortress of Solitude.
At the fortress, Artemis and Miss Martian work together to disable the scout ship, while Superboy, Robin, and Miss M disconnect the ship's main weapon with the plan to attach it to the bioship. As terrible as the episode has been so far on deaths, this is where everything goes horribly, horribly wrong. We lose Wolf as he defends Superboy from the scout ship's weapons feedback discharge. Then 2 more scout ships arrive. Artemis takes them down with explosive arrows as she's returning to the bioship, but one of those ships survives the crash and fires at Artemis, disintegrating her.
The team is devastated by Artemis's death, as are the viewers. Aqualad takes the team to the Hall of Justice in Washington, D.C., where they team up with General Wade Eiling and the Marines to defend what they can. The group head to the hall, where they find Martian Manhunter buried in the rubble, even though he appeared to be killed in space. He is severely disoriented and cannot remember what happened. Kid Flash puts together a hypothesis that since the disintegration rays emit zeta radiation, they are actually teleporters, explaining why Manhunter is still alive.
Not too long after that, though, the bioship is hit by one of the aliens' beams and is quote-unquote teleported, but Miss M clearly states that that did not feel like a teleport. The team then zetas to the cave, but can only go in one at a time. Aqualad is killed defending the tube and trying to help defend the Marines that stayed behind.
The team comes up with a plan to infiltrate the mothership, but before they leave, they use the cave's communications array to project a motivational message around the world. Superboy is hit by one of the alien beams during the assault, which is followed by Martian Manhunter remembering that the beams are not actually teleportation rays, leading the team to decide on a secondary objective of blowing up the mothership.
Robin and Kid Flash load up several bandoliers of explosives onto the power core of the ship. Unfortunately, they're trapped inside. Miss Martian and Manhunter escape by phasing through the walls, but Robin and KF fight to defend the explosives, dying in the blast of the mothership. Unfortunately, immediately after, a second mothership arrives to replace the one Robin, Kid Flash, and Superboy died destroying. As Miss Martian tells Manhunter that they need to escape, Manhunter appears to kill her, which shocks her back into consciousness inside the cave.
This is where we find out that the entire episode was a psychic training exercise gone horribly, horribly wrong. The team knew that they were in a training exercise going in, which is why they did not seem that bothered when the League was killed. But when Artemis was killed, Miss Martian's subconscious took control of the simulation from Martian Manhunter, and she pulled the rest of the team into the nightmare with her. Manhunter went back into the simulation to help, but was overwhelmed by their collective emotions. It was not until everyone was killed that he was clear enough to remember what was happening and shock McGann back into consciousness.
I'm feeling the Aster,
Man.
but it's a weird Aster.
Superboy, are you alright?
I'm fine. Feeling the Aster.
This is a fantastic episode.
It's a fantastic episode, and I have a lot to say on a lot of levels. From the opening scene, my wife, when she watched it for the first time, was shocked and looked at me saying, "What's happening?" Right? Now, the first time I watched the episode, I was like, oh, okay, it's some kind of dream sequence. That's fine. And so I'm watching it, and I'm like, oof, this is going wrong. And then it was teleporters, and I was like, oh, maybe this isn't. This isn't a dream sequence. Maybe they are teleporters. Oh, but then they're not teleporters. Wait, but now I'm already in the mindset of maybe it was teleporters, and it is real. Okay, it ended up being a dream sequence. Oh, but this dream sequence is unlike any dream sequence I've ever seen, and we're going to talk about that in depth in the Canary Debrief. So well handled, and still an emotional roller coaster after scores of viewings.
Yeah, this episode is one gut punch after another.
Yeah.
As I said at the top of this episode, I don't tend to react emotionally to media. I kind of react to the extremes. I react to the big heroic moments, and I react to the really, really horrible ones. And this episode delivers both.
Yeah, absolutely.
As many times as I have watched this episode, I still get emotional when it plays out. And I don't know if it's because it's simply so well made, or simply because I'm carrying so much knowledge of what the episode is.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, in combination with the next episode, we'll talk about Disordered. There's fallout, serious fallout from this episode. It is not a one-shot dream sequence reset to one kind of an episode, and we know that this changes everything, which I think on multiple viewings makes it even more powerful.
And that brings up something really great that Young Justice does. It has consequences. Yep. 2 episodes ago, Wally broke his arm.
Yep.
Still broken.
Yeah. And he's got he still has that fast healing thing that, we see in the Barry Allen Flash on TV and in the comics, but it's not as fast. And it's nice. I mean, a broken bone takes a really long time to heal appropriately, and he still heals quickly. But it's more like 2 or 3 times as fast as a normal human, and not like in a day. And so it's nice to see that continuing consistency.
And the fact that, as you just said, there is absolutely fallout from the events we just witnessed that will continue on, that again reflects that Young Justice does not shy away from dealing with heavy things and letting their effects continue on.
Yeah, any good science fiction or fantasy story should disarm us by putting us in a position that we can suspend our disbelief to see something that's fun or interesting or imaginative, but then tell us a story, point us at looking back at our own life and our own world and our own situation from a different perspective that we may put up walls about in our regular day-to-day life and catch us off guard, right? The X-Men in the 80s talking about racism, but talking about racism with a group of superheroes who were from all over the world, about not belonging and all of that. That's what good science fiction and fantasy does. And Young Justice, particularly in this first season, it deals with so many things about identity and about substance abuse issues and about having broken homes or being adopted and those issues. It just deals with all those things and can look at them from a safe arm's length to let us process those. And this episode takes this character, particularly of Miss Martian, and moves her from this stereotype TV thing that she wants to be, that she's trying to be, that she believes that she is, and moves her into an entirely different league with entirely different consequences for everyone in the team. Oh, let's start with some relatively lighter stuff, and then we'll build into some other things. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
We have some great 16 nods. Earth 16. We told you that in almost every episode. There's a 16 that's nodded to. In this one, it's on October 16th. It takes place at around 1600 hours, that kind of thing. But the real clear one is Robin stating at the end, 16 seconds and counting, which is all they have left until the bomb goes off. And he and Kid Flash look at each other. They nod. Robin has told Miss Martian we'll escape as soon as we blow the door, but as soon as Miss Martian and Manhunter are out of the room, Robin and Kid Flash nod to each other and head straight into the battle against some of these robots, and then the whole thing blows. Okay, maybe that wasn't starting with something light. There's pretty much nothing light about this episode, I think.
Here, Rich, here's an example of something light. The team had Arctic gear. It was really cool.
It was super cool. Robin's Arctic gear was totally cool. I'm not really big on the gimmicky silver grappling hook climbing Batman, but Robin's Arctic outfit is pretty rad. That's light. I agree.
Yeah, that's something light.
Nice.
And I think that's pretty much it. That's the only light part of this entire episode.
Yeah, that's pretty much, everything else is disaster. There's some little things that they do, too, that really pull things in, like when Iris is saved by Zatara and Flash, she turns to her cameraman to ask if he's okay. It's kind of a dumb little thing, but it's something that, again, makes it feel like, wait, there's consequence. It's not just about Iris and the fact that Iris is Barry's wife and all this kind of stuff, right? It's like, no, everyday people are being affected by this. And then, a minute later, they die. Iris saying thank you to Flash with this pregnant pause, this painful delay of the thank you Flash. And then seconds later, she watches him run up onto a rooftop to save some people, and that rooftop explodes. All these like little things over and over and over again. We get Icon here because they talk about how he's dead. It's always fun for me to see Red Tornado, who used to be a C-string hero back in the day, being presented as one of the heavy hitters of the Justice League. His strength, his durability, of course, but the idea that controlling air pressure, basically being able to suck the air out of a room when he's a android or a robot and doesn't need to breathe, how changing air pressure can crush buildings and tornadoes can do things, saving the world from a cloud of ash, and he's the last one to go down. It's interesting to me.
Yeah, this episode from the very first second is all about impossibly dangerous threats, and it's terrifying. It is frankly terrifying and brutal. While we see heroics happening and we see heroic sacrifice constantly on screen, this is just a brutal way to go for these heroes that we love.
Yeah.
It's because it's so quick. It's a flash and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's so... I can't even think of the word I'm trying to get here. There's no chance to process what happens.
Yep.
There's a flash of light. A hero that is beloved is gone, both to us as the viewer and for these characters that inhabit this world.
Yeah.
There's no person gloating as a supervillain saying, I did this. There's no enemy. It is just a faceless, tireless, ceaseless mass of enemies.
It's classic what DC Comics means to me. It is unrelenting heroism. From the point of the characters themselves making heroic sacrifices, but also to that speech and announcement around the world about how even if we go down, humanity will continue. That, to me, is what DC Comics is to me. And that's what I want to see in my shows.
That heroic speech is amazing. It is just perfect. Mm-hmm. During that scene, we actually have a cut back to high school, and we see some flashes of Mal and the other characters at the high school there.
Yep, and we see Alfred, and we see Barbara, and we just see some people in different places, like... It's great. The Marines, even one of the Marines is listening to it as he's marching into battle. And it's just so really well done.
I did want to actually ask you a question about that.
Sure.
When we cut to the high school and we see Barb and Alfred there, they are standing there kind of apart from everyone else. And there is a blonde girl with them.
Yes.
Who is that supposed to be?
She's come up a couple of times. You catch me off guard. So I'm going to have to actually look up her actual name. But she's a non-powered DC character. And she shows up in a couple of episodes. In one episode, when Artemis first goes to Gotham Academy.
Yeah.
Robin comes up, but she doesn't know it's Robin. And says, we'll laugh about this someday. And takes the picture and walks off. And Artemis is there saying, like, what was that? And the same character is there saying, he's just a freshman, ignore him. And then we see our first glimpse of Barbara, who says, what was that all about? Because she doesn't know who Artemis is and that kind of thing. Actually, let me look that up.
See how I worked in this nice break?
Yeah.
I'm pacing it for us.
So Bette Kane is a throwback to the original Batwoman and Batgirl pre-Barbara Gordon. They show her in the high school. In the comics, they show her older. She's dating Dick at one time in the comics as well. And the Kane, so of course Bob Kane was one of the creators of Batman, who's well attributed for that. But in the comics, So Mary Elizabeth Bette Kane was the very first Batgirl. And we see another Kane as Batwoman in the comics currently, but they haven't reintroduced this previous Batgirl yet that I know of, or they might have in Rebirth. I'm not sure. She's the niece of Kathy Kane, who's Batwoman. So they kind of make a nod to her in Young Justice, but we don't ever see her cross that line into becoming Batgirl. They also, I think they have a nod to her as Flamebird. So Nightwing got his name from the pair of Kryptonian heroes, Nightwing and Flamebird. If you've listened to that fan service that we had last time about the Capes Crusade, they talk about that a little bit and about the history of where that comes from. And then in the new Rebirth title of Nightwing, the very first thing he does and talk about where the name comes from. So she's got a bit of history in the comics. They don't do a lot with her here in Young Justice yet, but she's in it. She's been in the comics. She's been in at least season 1. She may have been in season 2, but I know she was in the season 2 version of the comics. We'll see. We'll see if she shows up in season 3. It'd be interesting. They already showed Stephanie Brown in season 2 being kidnapped, and she becomes both Robin and Batgirl as well. So I don't know how many Batgirls we're going to have. They haven't showed Cassie yet, who's the League of Shadows trained Batgirl. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. That was a lot of information all in one dump, but that's who that is. Bette Kane.
All right. Well, the Bat family is pretty big, so I would gamble that we will see it continue to grow in season 3. Getting back to Failsafe, though, there's so many cool little moments. I really liked how Connor stepped up to be the hero.
Yeah. Oy.
However, what we will learn in the next episode is why that happened.
Yeah.
So we'll save that. That's a bit of a teaser for the future. But I love him being the hero in this episode. I love when, I believe it is the general that says to him, "You're wearing the S, you got the job done. You're Superman."
Yeah. I'm not Superman. Tell that to the enemy.
Right.
It's so good.
When the general calls them the valuable assets that have to be protected, when they deliver that brilliant inspirational speech, when Calder is logical and decisive in the face of tragedy, when Robin steps up and does the hardest thing possible in his role. Those moments are just so well delivered, and they land with weight and a meaty impact against the emotional backdrop that's being painted here.
Yeah, and the focus of the episode is clearly on all of this emotional punch. But again, it's a bunch of little details, too. It's dumb, but it's the thing that bugs me is when I'm watching a show and there's like a gun mounted on a giant mech or something, and somebody rips it completely off the mech and is just firing it like it has some kind of trigger and a power source. It just drives me nuts. And just the little moment where Superboy is distracting the aliens so that they would open the fighter bays and Kid Flash and Robin can get inside. He pulls off one of the cannons, but I think Robin says, "Careful, don't disconnect the power source." It's so little. And then earlier on, when they do disconnect the power source, Miss Martian's like, "I have to integrate it with the bioship's power source and triggers, and it's going to take time." It's those little things that ground this kind of verisimilitude a little bit in this story, right? The odd little gravity well around the power source of the mothership is kind of cool. It makes for an interesting visual, but it also makes it feel like an alien, like a 0-point device or a mini black hole, something that can make an excuse for all of this power to be able to just disintegrate characters like Captain Atom, who is pure energy, right? And back to your Superboy point, that moment when Jason Bard, who's the Marine that he rescues, Superboy's like, "Can you make it?" And he's like, "I can make it, Superman," or something like that. And Superboy's like, "I'm not Superman," right? He keeps trying to state it, but he's really being accepted by everyone around him that Superman is dead. You are Superman. Whether you want it or not, this is your thing. It's just so good.
Well, let's take that as a transition then into 2 little mini secret origins you wanted to bring up here for us, Rich.
Yeah, this is, it's again, just keep scratching the surface of Young Justice, and it keeps going deeper and deeper. The computer recognizes Jason Bard and specifically tells us Jason Bard's name. Like, who is he, right? So Jason Bard in DC Comics pre-19 kind of 80s Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was a police detective working in Gotham. He had injured his leg during his time in Vietnam. After Crisis, he was also a police detective, but it was injured fighting Killer Moth, whatever. Both of those versions dated Barbara Gordon for a time. And according to Greg Weisman, the Young Justice version of Jason Bard is an old friend of John Jones, who is Martian Manhunter's secret identity, who is also a police detective in his secret identity that we don't get in Young Justice. So it's why he appears inside the simulation, because even though Miss Martian takes over, she's still using basically all of this kind of stuff she's pulling out of this construct that Martian Manhunter had created, right? John knew about the leg injury that Jason Bard had had when he was in the military. So now we've got this leg injury that happens with when the building collapses and Superboy lifts that big chunk off of him and blocks this damage, and he carries Jason Bard out of the fight. And so that leg wound even feeds into it. It's all of these little details that, again, the main punch could have been, we don't need all this. Like it's just about the emotional punch. Let's just focus on that. But they end up adding all of this richness to the history. So the Jason Bard one I caught. The other Marine I didn't catch until I started doing some research. When Jason Bard says, "See, I told you Superman wouldn't abandon us," or something, there's another Marine in that scene that says, "He looks a little young." Well, that's David Reed. And this is serious, serious digging, right? So David Reed in the DC Comics is Lance Corporal Reed, who's the great-grandson of Franklin Roosevelt, who, during a military defense of the National Museum in Iraq during DC's version of the Iraq War, Reed was exposed to this artifact that turned him into a hero called Lance. He fired energy bolts or something like that, and he had been missing an arm. Lance was quickly recruited into the Justice Society of America because of his relationship with Franklin Roosevelt, because they wanted to keep that memory of these heroes from the 1940s alive. And due to this complicated turn of events, he's later transformed into a hero called Magog, M-A-G-O-G, by this ancient Babylonian god, Gog, that gets woken up during a storyline. So it's a retconned origin for the character that was first introduced in the brilliant Kingdom Come miniseries by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. If you have not read Kingdom Come, you really should. Kingdom Come was kind of an answer, again, to these 90s calls for why DC wasn't Marvel, right? Why isn't Batman killing people, right? All right, well, we'll break his back. We'll make Azrael be Batman and show him killing people, and we'll show you that that's why he's not Batman. That's not what Batman is, right? Magog in this Kingdom Come was like the forefront of the rise of the murdering anti-heroes. He actually kills Joker in one of the very first scenes, and then Superman comes back to try and remind people why heroism exists. It's brilliant. So all of that is just folded into the fact that David Reed is Lance Corporal Reed is actually in this scene, in this episode. Like, they pulled all this richness of DC Comics and put it in a thing. And again, you don't need to know any of this, but if you do, it makes me wondering, is Magog going to show up in season 3? Did they have plans for him? Or are they just putting him in there because they want every supporting cast character to be rich in its history? I don't know, but it's just amazing. Amazing.
So there's one more thing I wanted to talk about here. And I was debating whether or not this would be part of the Canary Debrief, and I don't really think it is. So let's talk about it here.
Yeah.
I am trying to figure out if there were any clues to the fact that this was a dream sequence before we were told it was a dream sequence.
Yeah. I watch this every time trying to find stuff like that. And the only thing that kind of jumps out at me is, and again, we kind of hand wave it because we expect this from other kinds of animated series, the fact that all of these heroes die right in the beginning and the team is just like, okay, we're ready. And everybody seems nonplussed about it. But then as soon as Artemis goes down, there's clearly relatively huge reactions, as opposed to, like their mentors dying, Batman dying, that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not sure if I noticed anything. Again, I went back and forth. I'm like, oh, it's a dream sequence. Oh, it's not a dream sequence. Oh, maybe? Oh, I don't know. They did a good job of keeping me off guard enough that I was questioning what was happening. And then you follow it up with Disoriented in the next episode, and everything is brutal.
I think as a viewer, knowing that 14 or 15 episodes into a show, they're not going to kill off everyone.
Right.
Is the redeeming factor. But I know that because I know I'm watching television.
Right.
You said at the top of this episode, the first time your wife watched this episode, she was floored because she had no idea what was happening.
Yep.
So for the viewer coming into this without the nerdy foundation of how stories work,
yep,
might not have that expectation. So I'm saying to myself, Young Justice is so good. It's such quality. Is there anything that tells us within the context of the show, not with the knowledge of the real world, that something is wrong here?
Yeah.
There's two things, and I might be stretching here with the first one. The first one is that things seem to change around McGann. And we know that at the end, we're told that McGann took over, and with all this teenage angst and drama, she's the one that took us all to hell.
Right.
Specifically, there was the comment about the disintegrator beams being Zeta.
Yeah.
I think this is stretching, but at the point that I think it's Robin that says they're giving off Zeta.
It was Kid Flash. He was examining it with Robin, and he's looking over Robin's shoulder and says, "Look, it's Zeta beam radiation." And Robin's like, "I don't know, maybe."
But McGann believes him.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's when the story starts to shift a little bit.
Interesting.
So potentially that's a little bit of a hint there. But the second thing that I feel is the only clue that is a real hint is Kid Flash himself.
Mm-hmm.
He does not have a cast in this episode. He does in the episode immediately previous, and he does in the episode immediately following.
Oh, I didn't catch that. That's so funny, because I was watching a later episode, and he still had the cast on, and I was like, that's weird. Didn't he have the cast off? I thought I remembered an episode in between where he has the cast off. It was this one. Oh, good point.
It's super, super subtle.
Super subtle.
It's the only thing that I think is an indicator.
Interesting.
And even in the next episode,
yeah,
he's still wearing the cast. He's wearing it over his super suit.
His costume, yeah.
That's a precedent that the suit doesn't cover it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the only thing. That's the only thing I can find. And I think it's legit. I think it's supposed to be there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think you're probably right. Like his internal residual memory of himself in this construct, this matrix-like construct, is not having a broken arm. So yeah, that makes some interesting. Well, now you're gonna make me go watch it again. Thanks.
No, don't save Rich. Don't do it, Rich. Don't.
I'll be back.
No. We have to Canary Debrief. We have to do the Canary Debrief.
Oh my God, I watched it again.
All right, this episode is running really long, guys, right, but we have so much more to talk about. Let's jump into our Canary Debrief. Rich, you've got a lot to say here, so I'm going to turn it over.
Stick around. Class is in session.
Straightforward, here's the thing. This is how you do dream sequences right. The main problem with time travel or dream episodes or dream seasons, in the case of one 80s TV show, is that they tend to reset everything back to one, right? Everything goes back at the end, whether it's a few episodes like in Star Trek Voyager's Year in Hell, or whether it's a whole season or just one episode. There are few to no consequences to what happens. Usually one person is having the dream, or maybe a group of people are in an alternate timeline, but maybe only one person or nobody except the watcher remembers what happened. And when it's done like that, it makes the entire story a waste of time. There's no consequence. There's no moving things forward. Failsafe could have been that, resetting everything back to one and moving on. But it didn't. Drastically, painfully didn't. This whole episode did all three things in my holy trinity. Character growth. We'll be going into the details of next episode of the fallout from Failsafe. But Failsafe changed each and every main character, some in small ways, and some in absolutely life-changing ways. Artemis and Wally's dynamic is pushed forward. Wally's denial of certain feelings are confronted. We get deep and painful character growth moments for both Robin and Superboy. Miss Martian is forced out of her overly optimistic view of the world, which lays the foundation for some of her more just painful and brutal choices in season 2 when she really becomes her own character and not this Megan Morse wannabe character. It moves plot forward. If you consider the light, the main meta plot, then this episode doesn't do much to move that forward as far as the light's concerned. But if you consider that the characters, the family that's built, the team, the characters that come together to become this Young Justice show, then this episode affects everything in the plot to come. Every choice that anybody makes. It gives information, right? The Third and the Trinity. It gives us a look into Miss M's power, right? McGann's power is way, way more than we think that it can be. And we're going to see glimpses of that going forward. And to have Manhunter concerned about it, he theoretically knows her that well, that's crazy. It could be potential character intros with Jason Bard and Reed as well. We just don't know until we see that 3rd season. But if the bottom line is this, if you're going to do a Matrix like Star Trek time travel alternate timeline thing, you really need to watch this episode and the next one. Use it for all of the things that you would use any other episode for. Don't use it for filler or for a what if. Use it to push character growth, metaplot movement, and give information about your world like you would do with any other episode. Don't go for the cheap thrills.
And something else I would like to add here, talking about storytelling and story development, the heroes take responsibility for this episode.
Yeah.
The powers that be, the professionals, the leaguers, the guys that have been doing this, that have the targets on their chest. At the very end of the episode, Batman and Martian Manhunter and Canary, I think she's there. No, Canary's
Tornado
not
is there.
Tornado's there, yeah. But it's mostly Batman and Manhunter having the conversation. And they flat out say, this is our fault.
Yeah.
We didn't know. We didn't know how powerful McGann was. We did not anticipate this happening. And Batman's the one that freaking anticipates everything. Yep. He's the planner. He's the detective.
Right.
They reinforced that last episode when Robin, with that throwaway line, Batman's the greatest detective in the world. Mm-hmm. We know that about the character. They said, this is our fault. So going off of what you said about consequences, Rich, that is important. It's not just dealing with the fallout. It's dealing with who did it.
In some ways, that's heroism, right?
Yeah.
Take responsibility for your actions, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's how you deal with them that makes you a hero.
Right. And it's also accepting responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
In any kind of story, it's easy to say, oh, well, this just happened. It's done. Move on.
Yeah.
Who did it? Why did they do it?
Yeah.
If it's something this important and this monumental to your character development, there has to be reason and grounding and someone behind it. The things that happen, the events, need an anchor to make them real.
Yeah.
And we keep saying we will see more consequences. We will see more of this. That's in the next episode, guys. That's next week.
Yeah.
You got to listen to that one.
Yeah.
The fallout here is very, very real, and it's handled perfectly.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up this Canary debrief. Let's get over to crashing the mode.
Tell us something we don't know yet.
Sorry, BB. We can't risk altering the time stream. We do that, we're all feeling the mode.
All right, so we're going to talk about crashing the mode here. We are talking about spoilers specifically for the entirety of Young Justice, as well as DC Comics in general. If you do not want to listen to any of these spoilers, please stop listening and join us later in the episode. If you are still here, things are going to get messy.
Oh my gosh. It's funny though, because there's so much that happens in just the next episode that I'm not sure how much we're going to spoil on certain things, but like just hearing Martian Manhunter's voice echoing in my head in terms of raw power, she has the strongest telepathic mind I have ever encountered. That echoes into, again, the things that happen all the way into season 2. Jeez, when Martian Manhunter is having a hard time getting the information out of the Corlataeans in the second season, and she just walks in and tears that crap out of their minds. Man, God, you're just like, whoa, we are not dealing with the Hello Megan from Happy Harbor anymore. Whoa.
And all of the moments we've been talking about that lead into season 2 with McGann, I've brought this up several times. There are those small little moments where characters are telling her, use your power to its extent.
Yep.
It's okay to use your power on the bad guys.
Yeah.
Do what you have to do to complete the mission.
Yeah.
Knowing that McGann does not understand humanity, she's depending on her family to teach this to her. This is what she is being taught. And then in this episode, we're being told that she is the most powerful telepath.
Yeah.
Possibly in the world.
Yeah.
Let alone in this world of the multiverse.
Yeah. And really, like, it makes some sense, too, because there's also that foundational grounding of her idea that TV is TV. Bad guys are bad guys, good guys are good guys, right? It's okay to do it to the bad guys. Plants a seed of like, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense because, you know, bad guys in TV shows are bad guys. And they deserve everything that's coming to them. And that feeds into, even though she grows up more in that second season, I can see that still informing her decisions being made as she moves forward. In our discussion episode with Quinn Wilson, he was talking about, from a linguistics and psychology standpoint, the idea that McGann epitomizes this ability to belong, right? This drive, this teenage drive to belong to a group, to the point where, like, we as humans dress up in a particular way. Like, we want to not fit in the exact same way that everybody else is not fitting in, right? We're going to wear our goth clothes or whatever we're going to do, right? We change our external appearance with makeup and things that we can control. She literally changes everything about who she is on a genetic level. She's talking about this idea of who she is so palpable, and she can change it not just physically, but this physical mirror of her psychology. And all of these things that are happening in this first season are informing these things from season 2. I can't wait to see what happens with her in season 3.
I honestly cannot even imagine what they're going to do with some of these characters.
Yeah.
In season 3.
Oh, and then speaking of that, how about just that one moment where Superboy is looking at McGann in the eyes and says, "It's okay." I can't even say it, man.
Let me step in here. He says, "It's okay. It's what Superman would do."
Oh my God. And then when you get to the end of next episode where you find out what was going on in his head this whole episode. Oh my God. So good. I want to be that writer. Nicole Dubuc is making me want to be her writing this episode, because you've got to know that you've nailed it when you get to these moments.
And I think what is best to talk about here is the fact that this is arguably a kid's cartoon.
Yeah, it falls into a weird space, though. I mean, I get why the rumors were that, well, the reality was there was the toy sales were having a problem, but those weren't really well supported. Cartoon Network didn't support the show with this wacky release schedule, blah, blah, blah. But it does fit into this kind of weird section, like when kids are getting into 13, 14 years old, which would be the ideal target demographic for the show, the 10 to 14-year-olds, they're starting to discover other things. And so they might not be watching it as much, and the younger kids might not get the bigger things that are happening. And so it's a lot of adults and some teenagers watching the show that are super big fans, and that's what it is.
And it's the fact that the writers did not pull their punches.
No.
The writers did not say, well, if it's a kid's show, we're going to keep a kid's plot going. No, they crafted this huge meta plot that engages characters from the first second of the first episode to the last second of season 2.
Yep.
The fact that the writers do not shy away from stories that are this heavy.
Yeah.
It's just so fantastic. I think we also do want to touch on Robin here real quick in Crashing the Mode.
Yeah. Calder dies, and we'll talk about that, like his psychology of his choice in the next episode. But Robin picks up the team lead. He's the next logical choice in the team lead, and his first real session leading the team outside of maybe some very early things like Drop Zone, everybody dies. He leads everyone into a Kobayashi Maru that he had no idea what was happening and has to make a choice to die. He lies to McGann right at the end, saying, go ahead and leave, we'll blow the door, we'll get out, knowing that was never going to happen. Robin doubted the whole episode. From the first moment that Kid Flash said that he thought that they were Zeta Beam teleporters, Robin said, maybe, but I don't get it. I don't think so. And he sticks to that. And you get that subtle through line all the way to the end, where he's loading up bandoliers of explosives on that engine. And Kid Flash is saying, wait a minute, you knew all along. Robin knew the whole time that Superboy was going to die, that they were going to die, and he just knew and got the job done anyway, which informs so much the conversation he has in the next episode about what he learned about himself. And what makes this just, again, this brilliant dream sequence, not a dream sequence, is the fact that they lived it. They made these choices, and they made them, and they have to live with them. Even though none of them actually died, they have to live with the consequences of having chosen to have their friends die.
And as a little bit of a side note, may or may not be real, but when Robin gears up with the bandoliers, reminds me a little bit of Red Robin.
It really does. I absolutely agree with you. Red Robin's outfit, that is who Tim Drake becomes after his stint as Robin, who I hope we see in season 3 and get to see a little more of Tim's heroic personality I would like to see in season 3 as well. I absolutely think that Phil Barassa, or one of the character designers, did that on purpose.
Before we wrap up here, we really do need to touch on Wally and Artemis.
Yeah, why don't you go take that one?
Wally continues to be Wally until Artemis dies. And at that point, he steps into this role of grim determination. We see him first in the bioship just lashing out in anger, pounding on the council, just being angry and being sad and trying to understand the emotions of loss.
Yeah.
We've been dancing around their relationship in the episodes leading up to this. It's always been that weird antagonistic dynamic, but there's clearly something there. We've talked about this in Crashing the Mode before, that relationship does eventually develop. So we know those emotions are real.
Yeah.
So seeing Wally in that just moment of loss, say, all right, this is what we got to do. We got to step up. We got to end them. I'm here. And when he's there with Robin at the end and he's saying, you knew all along, this is it, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's just that moment where they look at each other and they nod.
Here's something a friend of mine said a while ago, and I can't remember the exact context, but she said, you can't be that bitter unless you have a really high opinion of the universe. And I see Kid Flash's reaction. We've talked about Kid Flash. One of the core tenets of his character is optimism. With Artemis's death, previously to that moment, he knew that everything was a simulation, so no big deal. But with Artemis's death and McGann taking over and him forgetting that it was a simulation, this is probably the first major loss and failure Wally has ever experienced. And his reaction is extreme because he grew up always believing things will work out. Things in the world are good. And I could see that if he had survived this, that he might have become a very bitter, disappointed person to find out that maybe that's not always true. We were reading deep psychological stuff into the consequences of this episode, but it's so perfectly reflective of the real world. And it does such a good job of making these characters feel real.
All right, so let's consider this mode crashed. Let's move on to some fan service. Rich, give us something to lighten the heavy mood that we are in. Bring us out of this darkness.
Okay, so our fan service is the Earth 27 Project. Earth 27 Project is a fan fiction project by Roy Westerman and the artist Phil Cho. We have already recorded a discussion session with Roy, and I'm not sure when that's going to be released. It may have already been released or it's coming soon, so look forward to it. And they're going to be talking about the project in detail, but until then, you can check out the pieces of fan fiction and the art and everything at the links that we're going to have in the show notes. What they have done is Roy started a project. His story behind it is heartbreaking about why he started it. I'm just going to leave that as a teaser. You can hear that episode. It breaks my heart. But he's created basically what Greg Weisman and Brandon Vietti have done. They took their most, I'm assuming, their most favorite versions of characters and tied them together in various ways to make this cohesive, cogent universe. And Roy and Phil are doing the same thing with their Earth 27 project. It's really cool and reflective, like parallel in many ways, the process of fan fiction and how you can do this kind of thing yourself. Now, Roy's a great writer. He's doing a lot of fan fiction wrapped around it. Phil Cho is a fantastic artist. But we're all fans. And I would love everybody to go check out the Earth 27 project and kind of see what might inspire you to do your favorite thing with your favorite stuff. I think it's fantastic. So go check that out.
Alrighty, the links for all of those projects, that art, that fantastic, fantastic art will be in the show notes for this episode, as well as on our website under the resources page. If you are a Young Justice creator, if you are created anything for DC in general, please get a hold of us. We want to share our passion for Young Justice with you. Maybe we can feature you here in fan service. Maybe we can bring you on the show. Please reach out, and please, listeners, check out everyone we talk about here. There's a lot of love out there. There's a lot of cool stuff to share. So check out the links, look at our resources page on the website, crashingthemode.com, and just keep this wonderful project going. We need to call this mission. We need to close this mission. I don't know if I can go on from this point. So thank you all for listening. We are going to head out of the cave here and try to recover. Guys, feel the Aster.
Hashtag keep binging YJ. Hashtag YJ3 when you're posting about Young Justice. And stay whelmed, everybody, if you can.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our computer is voiced by Madison Ray. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.